when you try to, let's say, improve society, you affect different people and different interests differently, and they are not actually commensurate. So you very often have all kinds of unintended adverse consequences. So I had to experiment, and it was a learning process. The first part was this subversive activity, disrupting repressive regimes. That was a lot of fun, and that's actually what got me hooked on this whole enterprise.
I'll start with this interview from 36 years ago in the year 1984 with Russian KGB defector Yuri Bezmenov and host G. Edward Griffin, in which he explains the 4 stages of subverting the free world.
Is the slow process, which we call either ideological subversion or active measures, активные мероприятия in the language of the KGB, or psychological warfare. What it basically means is to change the perception of reality of every American to such an extent that despite of the abundance of information, no one is able to come to sensible conclusions in the interests of defending themselves, their families, their community, and their country. It's a great brainwashing process which goes very slow, and it's divided in 4 basic stages.
What follows are said 4 stages.
The first one being demoralization. It takes from 15 to 20 years to demoralize a nation. Why that many years? Because this is the minimum number of years which requires to educate 1 generation of students in the country of your enemy, exposed to the ideology of the enemy. In other words, Marxism-Leninism ideology is being pumped into the soft heads of at least 3 generations of American students without being challenged or counterbalanced by the basic values of Americanism, American patriotism.
Our universities are teaching people totally deranged ideas, anti-democratic ideas, and it's not just that they're far-left ideas. They're ideas that are untethered to reality, dealing with race and gender and trans issues, for example, things that revolve around identity. They're teaching people these ideas. They're not hearing other sides of the coin. So they're all in their little safe spaces. They don't hear anything. And then when they do encounter something, they're so brittle, he's a Nazi. He's got to be a Nazi. Punch him. We got to overthrow the fascists.
It has to do with the fact that so many college administrators and college campuses that allow Antifa to work under their noses. We don't allow ISIS to recruit on college campuses, and we should not allow Antifa to do that either.
The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years. Actually, it's overfulfilled because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that. That's the tragic of the situation of demoralization. The next stage is destabilization. This time, subverter does not care about your ideas and the patterns of your consumption. Whether you eat junk food and get fat and flabby, it doesn't matter anymore. This time, and it takes only from 2 to 5 years to destabilize a nation, what matters is essentials: economy, foreign relations, defense systems. And you can see it quite clearly that in some areas in such sensitive areas as defense and economy. The influence of Marxist-Leninist ideas in the United States is absolutely fantastic. I could never believe it 14 years ago when I landed in this part of the world that the process will go that fast. The next stage, of course, is crisis. It may take only up to 6 weeks to bring a country to the verge of crisis. You can see it in Central America now. And after crisis, with a violent change of power, structure, and economy, you have so-called the period of normalization. It may last indefinitely. Normalization is a cynical expression borrowed from Soviet propaganda. When the Soviet tanks moved into Czechoslovakia in '68, Comrade Brezhnev said, "Now the situation in brotherly Czechoslovakia is normalized." This is what will happen in the United States if you allow all these schmucks to bring the country to crisis, to promise people all kind of goodies and the paradise on earth, to destabilize your economy, to eliminate the principle of free market competition, and to put a big brother government in Washington, D.C. with benevolent dictators who will promise lots of things, never mind whether the promises are fulfillable or not.
In St. Paul last night, and across our twin cities, a curfew went into effect. Because we had a relative stillness in St. Paul, we didn't make an enormous number of arrests, but every single person we arrested last night, I'm told, was from out of state. What we are seeing right now is a group of people who are not from here. As I talk to my friends who have been in this movement for a very long time, who wake up in this movement every day, and I ask them what they're seeing, what they're feeling, what they're hearing, we don't know these folks. We don't know these folks who are agitating. We don't know these folks who are inciting violence. We don't know these folks who are first in to break a window.
Joining me now is Ed Mullins, president of the New York Sergeants Benevolent Association, and Jerry McCarthy, former NYPD precinct commander and former Newark police commissioner. What has to happen now?
Well, Laura, I think the first thing that has to happen is to properly identify the problem. What we're looking at here is a coordinated national attack by groups like Antifa.
Any place, punch a Nazi in the face. Anytime, any place, punch a Nazi in the face. Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter!
Within Antifa itself, there's a lot of different groups that you'll find. A lot of the members may do it for animal rights or for anti-capitalism, pro-socialism. Personally, when I was in Antifa, a lot of the activism I did was for animal rights. But once they come together in the Black Bloc, they kind of forget all that. They go for that common goal of silencing whatever their opposition at the moment is.
And just to clear it up, what they do is they bring agitators in, they get in the crowd with people who really are concerned about the issue. In this case, it's about police-community relations and some of these terrible videos that we've seen. They stoke the fires that already exist.
Black protesters and political activists unleashing rage, defeating curfews and the military. Even the arrest of the officer at the centre of all this did nothing to calm the mobs.
In summer of 2018, I wrote a piece for the Wall Street Journal about the 5-week occupation and siege of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement facility in Portland. And I wrote very critically of what I saw, in addition to the breakdown of law and order in that neighborhood. We saw people affiliated with extreme left-wing movements in Portland, like Antifa, terrorizing those who lived in that community. Business owners in those areas, I interviewed those who were affected. 29th of June, this whole street had been shut down in an unlawful demonstration by masked Antifa militants and their allies with the Democratic Socialists of America. Before I got to the front of the crowd, probably right around here, because I remember this building with these two iconic sculptures, somebody or something hit me hard on the back of my head and knocked me forward. And before I could even catch my footing, then the punches came from every direction, and all I saw were fists and people dressed in black, people wearing masks. I remember trying to block my face. Next came this hailstorm of eggs and other hard objects. I was drenched head to toe, I was bleeding, my earlobe was ripped, my eyes were swelling with blood. The city has had, by this point, years of protests that turn into riots, and they still have not learned from any of the mistakes of the past. They have not evolved and changed their policing tactics. Over and over, it's always what is now a mantra for them, that they will not go in to intervene because it could incite the mob.
They're so well organized. They have one guy who does graffiti.
I want you to know this is not. Don't police people's way of. Let me tell you this. This is not a black woman who's putting Black Lives Matter. Right, but y'all doing that for us, and we ain't asked you to do that. Listen, don't spray stuff on here when they gonna blame black people for this, and black people didn't do it.
They have another guy who breaks windows. They got a third guy who's agitating the police.
Atlanta, CNN headquarters and police under attack.
Threw something on fire, Chris, a firecracker.
Yep.
Something's on fire.
Nick, you all right?
Police cars smashed, torched. Los Angeles, a single officer set upon trying to make an arrest.
The mob starts beating the officer. Look at that officer by himself there.
Dragged out, he collapses.
They have medics in the field. They have lawyers at every police district here in Chicago waiting for arrests to come in. So we have to first identify that is what's going on, because what I'm hearing is politicians across the country talking about police brutality while their cities are burning. And the cities are burning because of those leftists who have stoked these fires.
A nationwide fire, and where the first match was lit,
George Floyd!
Minneapolis looks like and feels like an active battleground.
In Wilmington, Delaware, my buddy Bob Tracy is arresting people from the state of Washington protesting in Delaware. If you're concerned about this issue and you live in Washington, you don't go to Wilmington, Delaware to protest. So it's quite well-funded, organized.
I think tonight downtown shops are being looted. In Washington, the White House briefly on lockdown. Crowds surge barricades, delivering fury to the president's front door.
It means that the people who live in New York want New York to end the violence, get the here, and give us back our city. How do you feel? Feel fine. I feel fine. That's right, because that's the first moment that we get this together. That us and everything that these cops have given their blood for, and the communities that we serve and they all love, can go back together and get those groups out of here from California, from all over this country, who are being paid to take this movement, which is a good movement, and turn it into violence against the men and women who love the communities.
But what I do know is that there is an agenda to destroy America. And sadly, said agenda has been in place for many, many decades.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence in the response and dedication of our citizens whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion. This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, my country, 'tis of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when it happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Nobel laureate Martin Luther King Jr., father of nonviolence in the American Civil Rights Movement, was killed by an assassin's bullet Thursday night. King, 39, was hit in the neck by a bullet as he stood on the balcony of a hotel here. He died less than an hour later in St. Joseph Hospital. The Reverend Jesse Jackson said he and others in the King Party were getting ready to go to dinner when the shooting occurred.
There was a group of people in the administration who used September 11 to implement policies that they believed in and were advocating before, but didn't have a mandate. They wanted to overturn Saddam in 1998. They wrote a letter to Clinton advocating it. And they have an ideology, which is that international relations are relations of power and not law. Law merely ratifies what the power has achieved, and we are powerful. Therefore, it is our duty to use that power. Now, this is a false ideology, but it is the one that has guided these people who were, in fact, the architects of the Iraqi invasion, because it was all done in the Pentagon.
This is an historic moment. We have in this past year made great progress in ending the long era of conflict and Cold War. We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Ever there were a time to act in a spirit of renewed multilateralism, a moment to create a United Nations of genuine collective action, it is now. Now is our time, a time to put the united back into the United Nations. United in purpose, united in action. Our common ambition is to make this outward renovation the symbol of inward renewal.
A renewal, importantly, in which the United States is willing to both lead and be part of. Mike Hanna, Al Jazeera, at the United Nations in New York.
The time has come for the world to move in a new direction. We must embrace a new era of engagement based on mutual interest and mutual respect. And our work must begin now.
And the President outlined his vision of a new world order in which the U.S. would participate fully, one rooted on 4 basic principles.
Non-proliferation and disarmament, the promotion of peace and security, the preservation of our planet, and a global economy that advances opportunity for all people.
Among the speakers that followed the U.S. President, the leader of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, speaking at the UN for the first time after 40 years in power. And waiving the UN Charter, he called for an end to any permanent membership of the Security Council, arguing that small nations should have the same rights as the big.
And then the assassination or the killing of Kennedy in 63 or 62, the President of the United States of America. Why? We want to know who killed him. Somebody who by the name of Lee Harvey, and then another Jack Ruby killed Lee Harvey. Why did he kill him?
Until now, the world we've known has been a world divided, a world of barbed wire and concrete block, conflict, Cold War. Now we can see a new world coming into view, a world in which there is the very real prospect of a new world order. In the words of Winston Churchill, a world order in which the principles of justice and fair play protect the weak against the strong. A world where the United Nations, freed from Cold War stalemate, is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders. A world in which freedom and respect for human rights find a home among all nations. Let us recognize that the hard work of freedom still calls us forward. We've learned the hard lessons of history. The victory over Iraq was not waged as a war to end all wars. Even the New World Order cannot guarantee an era of perpetual peace, but enduring peace must be our mission. Our success in the Gulf will shape not only the New World Order we seek, but our mission here at home. In the war just ended, there were clear-cut objectives, timetables, and above all, an overriding imperative to achieve results. We must bring that same sense of self-discipline, that same sense of urgency to the way we meet challenges here at home.
Dare I say that there are those alive today who are quite literally hell-bent on the destruction of the United States of America. Back on January 25th, the Washington Times ran an op-ed piece about how George Soros, at age 89, is still on a quest to destroy America. In it, the writer says, George Soros is 89 years old, but by gosh, before he dies, he's going to see to the internal destruction of America. At least that's how it seems. In Davos, Switzerland, Soros announced the infusion of $1 billion with a B dollars into a new open society.
When I made more money than I needed for my personal use or for the benefit of my family, I reflected, why should I do it? What am I going to do with this money? I really went through an extended period of reflection, and I came to the conclusion that what I really care about is a rather abstract idea, which is the idea of an open society. I then decided to set up this foundation, Open Society Fund, with the objective of opening up closed societies, helping to make open societies more viable, and fostering a critical mode of thinking. Then, after, as the system started, the communist system started to collapse, one had to build an open society, and that was much more laborious. Education was clearly something where relatively few adverse consequences. So giving scholarships to outstanding talents. That was good and important. For instance, we introduced Head Start in all the countries where we have foundations, spent over $100 million doing it, and it was really questionable whether we would have a systemic effect. I think we have done quite well.
To fund schools around the world, to educate against nationalism, is how the Financial Times reported it. In other words, to train the next generation in the evils of sovereignty, to teach the emerging youth how to become good, obedient citizens of the world.
But then I became concerned with the problems of globalization, where you have global markets, but you have politics based on the sovereignty of states. So how do you deal with that issue? And then I came to the realization that open society is endangered by our current leadership in this country. And that is when I refocused my attention on the United States.
That is when I refocused my attention on the United States.
Soros calls it his, quote, most important and enduring project ever, close quote. If successful, it could mean the collapse of borders, the implementation of world government, and the end of America as we know it.
It was a gradual learning process with foundations in each country, and then seeing what works in one country, trying it in the other countries. So it was like a kind of what developed a matrix, in fact, that we had national foundations, and then we had certain specialized activities. The state party line is false because it's imposed by force. And if you provide an alternative, then people can see the falsehood and the regime will crumble. And in fact it did. There is a syndrome of victims turning perpetrators. Again, it's not terribly well recognized, but it is gaining some recognition.
34 of what happened to George Soros' friends and neighbors.
You're a Hungarian Jew who escaped the Holocaust by posing as a Christian, right? And you watched lots of people get shipped off to the death camps.
Right. I was 14 years old. And I would say that that's when my character was made.
In what way?
That one should think ahead, one should understand and anticipate events, and one is threatened. It was a tremendous threat of evil. I mean, it was a very personal experience of evil.
My understanding is that you went out with this protector of yours who swore that you were his adopted godson.
Yes.
Went out, in fact, and helped in the confiscation of property from the Jews.
That's right.
I mean, that sounds like an experience that would send lots of people to the psychiatric couch for many, many years. Was it difficult?
Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Not at all. Maybe as a child you don't see the connection, but it created no problem at all.
No feeling of guilt.
No.
For example, that I'm Jewish, and here I am watching these people go. I could just as easily be there. I should be there. None of that.
Well, of course, I could be on the other side, or I could be the one from whom the thing is being taken away. But there was no sense that I shouldn't be there, because that was, well, actually, funny way, it's just like in markets, that if I weren't there, of course I wasn't doing it, but somebody else would be taking it away anyhow. In other words, whether I was there or not, I was only a spectator, the property was being taken away. So we are the leading power in the world. That puts on, we are the most successful, dominant economic power also. And that imposes on us a unique obligation to lead the world in improving the present world order. We also have a tremendous responsibility to bring about a better world order.
Pro-criminal and overwhelmingly elected with George Soros' money, and they're a major cause of the violence we're seeing because they keep putting the violent criminals back on the street.
I'm not sure we need to bring George Soros into this. I was going to say you get the last word, Speaker.
He paid for it. I mean, why can't we discuss the fact that millions of dollars he spent?
I agree with Melissa. George Soros doesn't need to be a part of this conversation.
Okay. So it's verboten.
All right, we're good.
I will tell you that George Soros is not to be discussed. It is verboten. When I got down to the end, one of the things at Fox News, they were starting to tell me, I can't talk about things, I just talk about this, stop talking about that. One of them was God, one of them was Israel, and the other one was George Soros. How can you be an honest reporter if you won't report the fact, the reported fact, that what Newt Gingrich said is absolutely true? This is why he is so off limits, because what is being done to our country, his fingerprints are all over it.
And he has caused chaos in markets and collapsed markets around the world. He's not welcome in, I think, 3 different countries. He is an enemy of the state in 3 different countries. He was just kicked out of Russia. I think Ukraine is thinking about it. Georgia, I believe, just did it. But that wasn't for actually collapsing them. That's because they knew what kind of influence he has. When he was asked about these things, he's so nonchalant about it. At least back then, 60 Minutes interviewed him. He said it's kind of fun, and I know people get hurt or people have their lives upended, but it's really kind of fun. And I feel almost as though he is almost so disconnected from reality, it's almost sociopathic. He wants to do what he wants to do, and that is create civil society 2.0, which is what I believe he's trying to do here in the United States. We exposed it in Ukraine. That's what the impeachment was all about. And what he does is he gobbles up the law enforcement. He gobbles up the attorney generals. He gobbles up the district attorneys. If he can't change it in Washington or in the capital of that country, he changes it by going in and controlling who's prosecuted and who's not. Then through his organizations, he begins to siphon money off of the country and puts his people in charge. That's what he was doing in Ukraine. That's what he's doing here in America right now. Newt Gingrich the other night on Fox News, they said about Soros that, we best not talk about him. I remember those conversations where you're not supposed to talk about George Soros.
Wait a minute. I want to get to that here in
Yeah, I want to get to that here in a second, but I just want to ask, is there any doubt in your mind that George Soros has his fingerprints on the upheaval we're seeing in liberal cities across this country?
Well, zero. He is funding through several organizations the riots and the people that are rioting in the streets through several organizations. There's absolutely no question. We can show you the documentation. I have shown the documentation on air.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about.
Get up and please get up in the face of some Congress people.
President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
I consider the Trump administration a danger to the world, but I regard it as a purely temporary phenomenon that will disappear in 2020 or even sooner.
How come that in this country, where you have pluralistic media, you are able to mislead people to the extent that the media has misled the people?